jurors from being identified, as well as to prevent any accidents among the aircraft.
Our next story concerns a different sort of flying machine, perhaps not of this world. The X-Files is one of the most popular television shows on the Fox network, but its stories and theme are really nothing new. Myths and stories from cultures throughout the world tell of humans being contacted by and interacting with beings from other dimensions. Some of the stories are remarkably similar. What's going on? Are we really being visited by extraterrestrials, or are people falling victim to some sort of mass delusion? Primetime's Glenn Pearson explores the phenomenon.
This may be a familiar-looking little creature to you. It's the typical small alien portrayed in a lot of recent movies, with the large head and big, dark, almond-shaped eyes. Looks pretty convincing on film, doesn't it? Of course, anything can look real in movies, but many people say they are real. How do you account for the many claims of actual sightings of UFOs, like this strange silver cylindrical object caught on home video hovering over a Florida beach, or these strange lights dancing about in the night sky over Los Angeles? And when you hear reports of a person claiming to have been abducted by aliens, should you dismiss it offhand?
Well, it approached us. It landed on the ground. Three very small human-like men got out.
They had me on some kind of an operating table. The Greys were surrounding me and touching me and took skin, this sharp knife-like thing right here.
Sound weird? Sure it does. But does that necessarily mean it can't be real?
As a social scientist, all I can say is that we have a phenomena that appears to be reliable in terms of we get the same description, the same story across socioeconomic classes, across different parts of the country, and to some extent worldwide.
Putting it all together, it acts like something that's true, that happened, that whatever the ultimate source of it may prove to be, as a psychiatrist, clinically it operates like real experience.
Dr. John Mack, Pulitzer Prize winning author and a respected Harvard professor of psychiatry. After working with some 200 patients during the last 5 years who claim to have been contacted by beings from another dimension or abducted by alien creatures, he wrote this book, Abduction: Human Encounters with Aliens. Dr. Mack was in Kansas City recently to give a lecture on the topic. He says what's going on challenges our notion of reality.
For example, this may in fact have happened, but not in our physical reality. It could have happened, say, we don't know when someone is on a spacecraft and those things are happening, that this is happening in our space-time dimension. In fact, abductees will often say, it's hard to explain to you, but this is real, but it's not occurring in our space-time universe. It's in another universe or a parallel universe.
How far-fetched of an idea is this? There are those who say it's pure poppycock.
In nearly 30 years of investigating UFO reports, I have yet to find a single piece of scientifically credible evidence that would indicate we've had even one visitor.
But there are those in the scientific community who say it's a mistake to write it off as nonsense.
You don't just dismiss it offhand because you're going to miss out. What if this is real that we're talking about? What if UFOs really are real? Then we certainly want to think about them.
And it appears a lot of people in this country are thinking about them. A 1991 Roper poll indicates that from several 100,000 to several million Americans may have had abduction-related experiences. What do you think? Glenn Pearson, News Channel 4.
Well, as Glenn discovered, and you're going to find out, there's a lot more to see and hear about here. Too much for just one report. Join Glenn all next week on the morning show at 7 o'clock as he continues to explore UFOs and alien abductions.
It's 8:31 right now. Welcome back to the morning show. Have you ever seen a UFO? You know, something moving about in the sky that you know just shouldn't be there. Maybe strange lights darting about in the night sky. It could have been an airplane, a helicopter, or perhaps just a bright star. But a lot of people swear they've seen alien spacecraft, and some scientists even say they do exist. Maybe you think you've seen one, or you may say there's no such thing. Chances are you've wondered about them from time to time. We're going to explore the phenomenon all this week, beginning with this report on UFOs and alien abductions.
Does this this look unusual to you? It was odd enough to compel an amateur photographer to capture it on videotape. A beam of light shoots to the ground as what appears to be a craft of some sort hovers above. Is it a UFO? The photographer says it is, but what do you think? So many people in this country claim that they've seen a UFO that there's a good chance if you haven't, you know someone who thinks they have.
I was standing in the front yard, and I noticed 3 bright white lights to my left.
Wally Laws, a Kansas City, Missouri firefighter for nearly 32 years, says what he saw at his Truman Lake cabin in the fall of 1991 was like nothing he'd ever seen before.
And at one point, they all 3 stopped. The one in the middle went back to where I first saw it. It stayed there. The 2 that were abreast of it did little maneuvers like this. One made a loop towards me. The one on the other side looped away from me.
What Wally describes is strikingly similar to a strange display of lights in the night sky over Los Angeles, captured on home video last August.
And then I noticed, well, there's no noise connected with this. And I'm maybe a quarter of a mile away from them. When I got my binoculars, I got them in my field of vision, and then there wasn't a white light on each one of them. There were 3 distinct lights on each object, and they were red, blue, and a real pretty gold light on all 3 craft.
Wally is not the first person in our area to see something so strange in the sky. In fact, nearly a century ago in Kansas City, it's reported that up to 10,000 people witnessed what they called an airship. Nearly 7 years before the Wright brothers made the first successful airplane flight of record, an amazing sight appeared Thursday evening, April 1st, 1897. The story ran in the Kansas City Times the next day.
The newspaper reporter wrote that people came out of the Savoy Hotel to see the starship. In fact, the largest crowd anywhere in the city, he said, was gathered right here on 9th Street between Broadway and Wyandotte. He said the aerial navigator would move his craft up to the heavens with the velocity of an eagle and move to the north and back to the south, and then just as quickly come back down to the vicinity of the Earth and startle all of the onlookers by flying over their heads.
The article said it shot out a beam of light very much like a searchlight. Some of the time the light was white, and then it changed to a bright red. The description of the craft was very much like some UFOs are said to look like today. Was it a mass hallucination or something else? Some within the scientific community say there is evidence of the existence of extraterrestrial craft.
After you look at the possible accelerations compared to distances away, it implies technology that's vastly beyond anything we have. So I would tend to believe that the craft were extraterrestrial.
Now tomorrow you're going to see video recorded from the camera aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery during a 1991 mission. And you'll find out why a physics professor thinks alien spacecraft were recorded in action. That's tomorrow as we continue our look at UFOs and alien abductions. It's coming up on 8:31 right now. Welcome back to the morning show. It's one thing when you or I say we've spotted a UFO. Now, anyone can pass it off as a mistake. You know, it was probably something else. Our eyes played a trick on us. But it's quite a bit different when a scientist says he has video proving the existence of extraterrestrial craft. And when that video comes from the space shuttle, now that ought to raise a few eyebrows, and it has, as you'll find out from this report on UFOs and alien abductions.
This is video beamed back to Earth from the Space Shuttle Discovery during a routine mission, September 15, 1991. It's known as STS-48. Notice the little specks floating about in the video. Watch how they shoot off in various directions all of a sudden. They could be significant, or they could be worth nothing at all, depending on who you believe.
NASA's official explanation for the specks is that they're merely ice particles that were pushed away by the Space Shuttle's attitude adjuster rockets. But University of Nebraska physics professor John Casher says he's proven that's just not so.
Those objects were out in space away from the shuttle. They could not have been ice particles close to the shuttle. They couldn't have been space junk or satellites or meteors because those objects don't change directions.
Dr. Kasher says watch this object on the right moving toward the top of the screen. In reaction to a flash from the lower left area, the object stops for a fraction of a second, then darts off to the right. And then it appears that something may have fired toward the object that darted away.
After you look at the possible accelerations compared to distances away, that it implies technology that's vastly beyond anything we have. So I would tend to believe that the craft were extraterrestrial.
That is Kasher's opinion, and he's entitled to it. The NASA scientists who have analyzed the same imagery have come up with quite different and very prosaic explanations. And if there were any evidence that we have extraterrestrial visitors, nothing would excite NASA more.
In his nearly 30 years of investigating UFO reports, Philip Glass says he's yet to find a single piece of scientifically credible evidence to indicate we've had even one visitor. In his book, UFO Abductions, A Dangerous Game, Glass presents the argument that while reports of UFOs may be somewhat harmless, claimed abductions have a much darker side.
As I just recently found my own sanity. I went through a period of being afraid and feeling alone because a lot of people don't want to talk about the evil side of it. I'm going through therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder.
42-year-old Vicki Ross of Lincoln, Nebraska, says she remembers being abducted by aliens when she was 15 and claims it's not over yet.
But the experiences are still coming on.
And many others in this country report abduction-related experiences. In fact, a 1991 Roper poll indicates that the number could be as many as several million Americans. What sort of phenomenon are we dealing with here?
Tomorrow, we're going to explore claims of alien abductions. You'll hear from alleged victims and the people who try to help them deal with their experiences.
Very interesting.
It's 8:30 right now. Welcome back to the morning show. You may have noticed there have been a lot of movies made recently about actual accounts of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens. Their stories provide excellent material for novels and movies because they describe extraordinary things they say really happened. But skeptics say extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Those who claim they've been abducted say it doesn't matter whether people believe them or not. Their chief concern is finding meaning for their experiences. In this report on UFOs and alien abductions, we bring you some of their stories.
We were at an outdoor movie at a elementary school playground. We were early, and somebody said, what's that over the trees to the east? And we looked east and saw a cluster of colored lights. Well, it approached us. It landed on the ground. Three very small human-like men got out.
John Foster, a 57-year-old semi-retired engineer from Lincoln, Nebraska. He says he's had contact with aliens for most of his life, beginning when he was very young.
6 of us were taken aboard, and it was announced that a needle would be placed in our lower abdomens and that we would go through a physical examination before they took us, and they took us one at a time. During that period, I noticed that the entire crowd was frozen.
This experience, John says, happened in 1950 when he was a teenager. He says his many encounters with aliens have had a profound effect on his life. These illustrations were drawn by John. He has many sketches of encounters throughout his life. They help him tell his story and help him deal with the events, something that has not been easy. And it hasn't been easy for 42-year-old Vicki Ross either, also of Lincoln, Nebraska.
There was a time when I started with my psychiatrist. I wasn't doing too well. And my anxiety level was extremely high. And I'm over quite a bit of that now, but the experiences are still coming on.
Vicki says they began when she was just 15. She describes something quite common among people who tell of abduction experiences, a kind of medical examination.
They had me on some kind of an operating table. The grays were surrounding me and touching me and took skin, this sharp knife-like thing right here.
They put me on the examination table. There was a woman there with a wig on, and she resembled what some people call the little gray beans with the slant eyes, although not exactly. She said she was wearing a wig to make me feel more at ease. There was what looked like half human and maybe half alien, or whatever you want to call them, at my feet.
You heard John and Vicki speak about the Greys, the typical small alien beings seen in so many movies with the large head and dark almond-shaped eyes. By some accounts, several million people in this country alone report having contact with these beings. Could it be real?
There's a big difference between psychological reality and physical reality. And most of the people that have these experiences, they are experiencing something which they believe to be encounters with aliens and alien abductions. But unfortunately, we've not been able to in any way establish the reality of these psychological experiences.
How do we decide what's real except by whether we think someone is authentically talking about actual experiences they've had? And when you have many people talking about, as in this case, maybe hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people talking about the same experiences, how do we decide whether that's real or not?
The psychology community is sharply divided on what this alien abduction phenomenon is all about. No one knows the exact source. Some attribute it to a sleeping disorder. But if that's true, how do you account for an experience shared by a father and his two daughters? You'll hear from them tomorrow as we continue exploring UFOs and alien abductions.
This is really bizarre.
Yeah, it
really
is.
Bizarre.
It is. And the people who say they've had these experiences admit they're bizarre. They don't necessarily know how to explain them. They said, but for God's sakes, they are having them, and they want to find out why.
Yeah. Something is happening.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's 8:31 now. Welcome back to the morning show. Psychologists and psychiatrists offer various opinions on why so many people are reporting that they've been abducted by beings from another dimension, or aliens if you prefer. There's a striking similarity in stories from alleged abductees in many parts of the earth. Some psychologists say a common sleep disorder can bring on strange hallucinations, and suggest this, coupled with well-publicized descriptions of various types of alien creatures, have led to similar reports. Now, this may well account for some abduction claims, but how do you explain an experience shared by three members of the very same family? In this report on UFOs and alien abductions, listen to their story, and you decide if anyone can say for certainty what is or what is not.
You're looking at pieces of John Foster's life, a life, he says, that has been filled with repeated visits by alien beings. The 57-year-old semi-retired engineer drew these pictures to illustrate the experiences he says he's had. John is not the type of person you might call strange. In fact, far from it.
I've been in the nuclear field, the aerospace field, fluidics, and also commercial alarm systems.
John says during some of his experiences, other people were with him. His two daughters, Karen and Kendra, back him up on that claim, as they recall a family camping trip in the mid-'70s to Lake Dillon in Colorado.
My brother and my dad and I were down by the water skipping rocks, and I saw my dad's face. He was wearing his cowboy hat, and I saw his face all lit up. We saw what we assumed was a helicopter come across the top of come over the top of the trees and shining a spotlight down into the trees. But the strange thing about it is that I don't remember hearing any engine noise. No wind, no noise.
They both tell of a structure they saw, but it seems to have appeared slightly different to each of them.
And there was like a shed. We were trying to decide whether or not we should go in it and see what was inside. And I don't remember going in it. I do remember seeing my sister sitting in there. The picture I have in my mind of her sitting in there is when she was smaller. We were looking down onto the lake, and there was a houseboat out in the middle of the lake, and kind of a small houseboat, and it was just very plain with a rectangular house part in the middle of it. But there wasn't a door. It was just a doorway, and you looked into it, and it was just all black. I remember my dad telling us that everything was okay. The more I thought about it, the more pictures that popped into my mind were from the top looking down. And I don't know if it was an out-of-body experience or if we were actually up there. I really can't say. I remember seeing my dad standing on shore from the water, and a voice telling us to come back.
KU psychology professor Dr. Fowler Jones has worked with John Foster and is familiar with this account of a shared experience. The family gave him permission to discuss their case with us.
Now, there are probably psychiatrists, psychologists that say, well, maybe this is a folie à deux, which means a shared psychosis where you have people that are very close to the patient and they each contaminate each other with an unusual delusion or idea. But I have no evidence that that is what has occurred here.
And in many cases, when we investigate these kind of claims, we usually come up with some bits of information that we were not given originally. People will tend to elaborate to make the story consistent.
Why do we immediately assume that people, I can answer my own question, that people might be making it up rather than that they're telling the truth? The reason is we don't want to believe it's true. It's disturbing to us in this culture that there should be some other intelligence entering into our waves, and we're not the top dogs in the universe anymore.
So what does the government know about this? Is there something they're not telling us? We'll examine that issue tomorrow as we conclude our look at UFOs and alien abductions.
That is so strange that 3 members of the same family say that it happened to them.
I know. It was something weird. They didn't say that they were abducted, but all 3 of them shared this really, really weird experience at the same time. What does that mean?
Strange. Interesting.
Welcome back to the morning show, 8:34. What does the government know about UFOs and reports of alien abductions? News Channel 4 contacted the Pentagon. A spokesman told us that the U.S. government no longer tracks UFOs and that all files related to UFOs were turned over to the National Archives in the late 60s. But there are people, some of whom have been in key government positions, who say the government is not telling all it knows. Hear what they have to say now in Glenn Pearson's final look on UFOs and alien abductions.
The government may say there's nothing to reports of UFOs, but the sightings and distorted pictures of alleged spacecraft keep coming in, along with reports of abductions. Does the government know something it's not telling us?
I don't know what the government knows. I assume that of the hundreds of millions of dollars that we spend on land-based, air-based, and space-based sensors, that there is a reasonable probability that they have some data that might explain some of the phenomena that's reported.
Dr. Scott Jones, former special assistant to Senator Claiborne Pell. About half of his 30-year U.S. naval career was spent in intelligence service overseas.
I think there is a high probability that they have some data that would relate to some of the anomalous phenomena that has been reported over the years.
Dr. John Kasher, who has analyzed a video beamed back to Earth during a September 1991 space shuttle mission, says it shows the existence of alien spacecraft. And he says the government is hiding a lot.
The topic of UFOs is the most highly classified topic in all the government and military. It's 2 full levels above top secret. UFOs are more highly classified than nuclear weapons. It's a fact, it's an established fact, that the government is covering up UFO information. The only question is, what are they covering up?
The idea that there might be intelligent life out there is something that is very exciting. The space agency would love it if there were any scientifically credible evidence. But the only people who make those claims are individuals who seek publicity, seek attention.
But a growing number of people want to see open and honest research into UFOs and even alleged alien abductions.
I feel it's really important for some intelligent people to ask some questions about what's going on here because, you know, I know my father's not crazy.
This is a phenomena that we really need to look into. It may be that we'll be totally wrong, that these aren't aliens or from outer space.
We don't know what we're dealing with. But first we have to acknowledge we're dealing with something. But we don't usually get to that question because people are so busy not wanting to take it in as something real.
Dr. Mack is falling prey to the delusions of the people that he's interviewed and that he himself is deluded about alien abductions.
Is it a mass delusion? No matter what your opinion is on the topic, the strange nature of the phenomenon, coupled with the huge number of people who claim to have seen UFOs or have even made contact with other beings, has to make you wonder. Does anyone know what's going on? Glenn Pearson, News Channel 4.
Open.
Come on, you're gonna make us late.
Hey, man, what is this with you? What's your problem?
Everything you want in a city, without all the worry and rush. Exciting places, smiling faces, come on and join us. Lincoln is it. Perfect place for your family. Lincoln is it. So much to do and so much to see. If you want to know the place to be, Lincoln is it. Sports and entertainment, shopping and fine food. You're the worry and rush. Exciting places, smiling faces, come on and join us. Lincoln is it. Perfect place for your family. Lincoln is it. So much to do and so much to see. If you want to know the place to be, Lincoln is it. Sports and entertainment, shopping and fine food. You're gonna love the feel of Lincoln. It's all right here for you. Lincoln is it. A great place to work or play for a lifetime or just one day. Lincoln is it.
Have you ever seen strange lights in the sky and didn't know what they were, or felt like you were being observed by someone or something? In tonight's Nebraska Matters, Shannon Powell visits a Lincoln group that's all too familiar with such close encounters.
I'd kind of like to hear from everybody here how the last 30 days has been.
At first, it sounds like any other support group.
I see that John has a lot of anger still.
Talk of anger, fear, and misunderstanding.
I haven't really had any experiences that I recall since last October.
But the thing that brings these folks together one Sunday night a month is out of this world.
We saw a disc. I mean, it was not a plane.
Oh, yes.
Wow. It was a large disc. 1 o'clock.
Everyone claims to have seen UFOs. Most group members, though, have lived with a secret for years. They say they've been abducted by aliens.
We've all been tested. None of us are crazy.
We're just having weird damn things happen and would like to know what they are.
The support groups here, when somebody's having a tough time dealing with something, they can bring it to the support group and talk about it without fear of ridicule, in total anonymity.
And it's amazing the coincidental things that happen between us. I mean, it's unbelievable.
John Foster has been a support group member since the beginning, back in 1988. He says he's had more than 3,000 close encounters during his lifetime.
I had several UFO experiences here, and one very lengthy, complex experience that involved 30 to 50 people.
John's talking about the Bethany encounter. It happened in 1950. A playground stood where the Cotner Senior Center now is. 13-year-old John was here for an outdoor movie.
Some people were commenting about lights that were over the trees over here to the east, and so we looked east and we saw this cluster of colored lights moving slowly and randomly back and forth. It landed across Holdridge Street, and 3 small human-looking men got out and walked on the ground.
John says he felt a powerful urge to go to the craft and was then levitated on board. That's where John believes 2 aliens examined him.
I felt myself swooping down out of the saucer back to this location here.
John says the spacecraft reappeared a couple of times.
The last I saw of it, we were turning, heading for the playground, and I looked back and I saw it floating down Holdridge Street, just over the trees, bobbing up and down and zigzagging right and left, just as we saw it in the beginning.
Then the UFO was gone. So was John's memory of the incident until 1986. One September night that year, he remembered the sighting.
I felt as if I'd been raped. It was just like a physical rape, and I would burst out in tears. I would weep for 10, 15 minutes.
John says his last alien abduction occurred in the fall of 1986.
My experiences, because I've remembered so much, can contribute a great deal towards understanding.
He's written a book and drawn pictures based on his countless encounters. John's wife, Ann, is by his side for support. Ann was a UFO skeptic until 1992, when she had a sighting.
All I could say was that it was an answer to my prayer.
Ann's now a regular at support group meetings.
It's just really important that I participate and be able to be on some level of what John's world is.
Those of us who are being abducted will want to know why.
Something that makes us all the more unique as human beings.
If you analyze the experiences overall, they're very positive.
Shannon Powell, 1011 News.
If you have any comments or ideas for Nebraska Matters, please write to us here at the station, P.O. Box 30350, Lincoln, Nebraska 68503, or you can reach us at the internet.